Welcome, welcome, and hello, and welcome to our podcast, How to Gaps podcast. Today, I am very, very grateful and very excited to interview Monika Corrado. Monika is a teaching chef. She's certified nutritional consultant and certified GAPS practitioner, and she was also named the GAPS chef by Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride herself. Monika is super, super passionate about illuminating the connection between food and well-being. She has also been a member of the honorary board of the Weston A. Price Foundation for more than 20 years. She is a dynamic teacher, speaker, consultant, and author who lives to share the tools, knowledge, and inspiration to cook nourishing traditional food. And one of the most important resources, actually two the most important resources for all Gapsters, is her GAPS cooking book, which is the complete cooking techniques for the GAPS diet, and her Meat Stock online class. Monika, I'm so excited to have a chance to have this interview today. So welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much. Yes.
So
thank you.
Monika, can you tell us a little bit more about how you actually became involved in the whole GAPS diet?
Yes. Okay. So I had been teaching traditional food classes, which is we call them Weston A. Price or Nourishing Traditions classes, for many years. And I went to see Dr. Natasha for the first time when she came to the U.S., where Sally Fallon invited her to speak at Wise Traditions in Virginia many years ago. And so Dr. Natasha was billed as talking about children's health. Those are my little quotes, children's health. And I thought, I really need to go. I want to hear, something inside of me said, I really need to go. So I went. There were probably 350 people in the room, a lot of people in that room. Just like every time she speaks, there's a huge number of people in the room. And I remember sitting in the back of the room and just listening to her. And I actually, it was a big turning point in my life, in my teaching, and my professional life and my personal life, because I knew that everything she was saying was correct. Like I knew it. I had been looking for, how do we help people that have autism? How do we help people that have allergies? How do we help the children, right? It was amazing to hear how she had put it all together. She'd pulled it all together from the SCD, right? Really, really, and then added all these things. So anyway, I just remember sitting in the back of that conference room and weeping. I really did. I just was like, oh my God, she's got it. This is it. This is it. So that that story is on my website, simplybeingwell.com. People want to hear more of the details, but that was the moment where I went, I got the book. I read the book once. That was the yellow book at the time. Now we have blue, red, green, etc. Right? So I read the book. I read it again. And I knew that this was the answer. And so I had many, many students who on the East Coast, which is where I was living at the time, and I had several approach me and say, can you teach the GAPS diet? Can you teach cooking? Because I was teaching cooking for Weston Price, which is all the soaking and the sprouting and the bone broth and the ferments and the this and that. I've been teaching that for 10 years or so, right? And now I thought, yeah, sure, I can teach the GAPS diet. Why not? I mean, why not? Meaning I had the training, I had the knowledge. Now I just had to figure out, what was it that was so important, that was so different? What were the tweaks, right? What were the things that moved it from a well-being diet, a maintenance diet, which is what I call Weston Price. That's what people can like graduate to after they do GAPS at this point. And this therapeutic diet, this healing diet, what were the differences? And so I just dove into the book and I figured it out, and I started, offering cooking classes on GAPS. What's the difference between meat stock and bone broth? What's the difference between cultured dairy or yogurt for GAPS versus everywhere else? What are the important pieces that really make a difference? As you know, right, when you work with people, they're very important. So it was way back then, and that's how I became involved. And then as I was teaching these classes, I realized that people had no idea I mean, this was really a shocker. People had no idea that bone broth was not what they were supposed to be doing on the GAPS diet. So yeah, I don't know if you want me to just go right in there or if you want to ask more questions, but that was really the piece that got me to write the first book about meat stock versus bone broth, which became part of my big book, which is the one that you just talked about, this big book. It became, right, it's this, oh, it's a little bit glary, but it's this piece to talk about why meat stock, why is it so important on GAPS, and it's not bone broth. So anyway, I probably jumped ahead, but
no, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing your story. And
yeah,
I think for many of us who see Dr. Natasha speak, whether it's in person, whether it's any YouTube interview, it doesn't
yeah,
really matter.
yeah,
She just inspires people. And I remember listening to her podcast to interview, and everything she said resonated with me. And
yeah,
I hear the same repeated answers from my clients, from other people who found gaps.
yeah,
And it's just always the same. Everything she says makes sense, whether you're a scientist or whether you're
yeah,
a layman person, it doesn't really matter, because I think that Natasha speaks from the point of the truth, and she's got so
yes,
much clinical experience, and she was kind of, merging that traditional wisdom of the nourishing foods and remedies
yes,
from traditional cultures with her
yes,
clinical experience, and it just makes sense. So, I'm so grateful that you actually went to that conference. You saw her, and you were inspired to actually get your hands dirty into teaching people on how to make meat stock properly, because you've mentioned, you read the yellow book, you read it so many times, and it has resonated with you. What is the difference between that Western A price and gaps? That difference is in meat stock, not the bone broth. But can you maybe tell us why actually meat stock is considered such a healing and maybe essential component of the GAPS diet?
absolutely. I'm happy to. Yes, because I've spent a lot of years trying to get people to know the difference. It's meat stock, folks. It's meat stock, right? So in any case, why is it a healing component? It is essential. It is, I call it the foundation of GAPS. It is, if I don't want to be too strong, but you want to get this right, right? Like you really want to get the meat stock. You want to know how to do it, make it. You want to incorporate it into your diet. You want to have it as part of how you live every single day. Even after you graduate off of GAPS, meat stock is a component, an essential component to staying well, being well, staying well. Why? Because it has all those things that we need. It has the gelatin, it has the collagen, right? It has the amino acids. So it has the protein, the fat, and the, I don't want to say glue, but we use analogies when we speak. It's not really glue, but it is the component that makes up really all of us. Collagen is the most prevalent protein compound in the body, right? The hair, the skin, the nails, the stomach, the small intestine, the lining, all of it. We are made of this. And if we don't have it, if we don't eat it, we can't make it. So so meat stock is all about healing and sealing. I call it the healer and sealer, right? It's the healer and sealer. And again, that's an analogy. It doesn't actually seal it because we need to allow for some things to pass through, absolutely. But we don't want these big, I don't want to call them holes, but we don't want anything leaking, quote unquote, big molecules into the bloodstream that shouldn't be there. So meat stock really is the foundation of a healing diet. And the way that I have taught it, and I continue to teach it, and the way that I teach it in my masterclass is, how do you incorporate this food as a one-pot meal? right? This is one of the fundamental differences between bone broth and meat stock, is that meat stock, because it's made with meaty bones, what I call meaty bones, right? It's meat with a joint in it, it's with a bone in it, with connective tissue around it. It might have heads or feet or, all that good, we call it nibbly bits, or Dr. Tasha does, right? All the connective tissue, it's got to have the connective tissue, right? But you can eat, you can and you must, right? Eat all of it. We eat all of it because those are your building blocks. Those are the building blocks for the body to be well again. And so meat stock can be eaten well. And I think that's one of the ways, that's one of the things I've been trying to teach really since I taught the difference between meat stock and bone broth. Most people are starting to get that. But still, we have a lot of people who are just making a bunch of stock, right? Like, and they're throwing everything out. I'm like, no, 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 no. You need to eat that collagen. You need to eat that connective tissue. You need to eat that skin. You need to eat that meat, right? We need to eat those, all of it. So hopefully getting people to see that meat stock really is a meal, because many people, as I said, they think it's just stock. And this is one of the ways I realized that people were getting, I don't want to say getting it wrong, but they were confused, right? They were confused. They thought they had to drink it all day long. I'm not saying you don't drink it all day long, but there's another way to incorporate it as part of your meal plan, right? It's a really interesting thing, because in Weston Price nourishing traditions, which I bow to, I love, I still teach. Of course, it's good for many, many, many people, has a lot of the same foundational principles, right? Real food, clean sourcing, all these good things. Yeah. But one of the things that makes GAPS easy, which nobody thinks about, but I want you to know, makes GAPS easy, is that you could make dinner in your one pot,
In one pot.
big Dutch oven, or big stock pot. I don't care what you use, right? Like big pot, and you eat the meat and you can eat the vegetables. Maybe not if you're on no plant, of course. You are the no plant guru, so we could talk about that. But most of the people can be eating the meat, eating the vegetables, drinking the stock, and all of a sudden they just had dinner. Very different than I just took 72 hours to roll a pot of beef bone broth, and now all I have is the broth. I have to throw everything else out, right? So it's an interesting thing. I realized back when there were only things like Yahoo groups. Remember those a long time ago?
I do.
Yeah,
No
there was no like
Facebook.
YouTube.
Yes.
There was no nothing else out there. There was a Yahoo group where moms were talking about GAPS, and they kept saying, I can't find enough bones. I can't buy enough bones. My child doesn't want to drink this stuff. I can't get enough, right? And I thought, they're making bone broth. And bone broth is not what we're supposed to be making on the GAPS diet. We're supposed to be making meat stock, short cooked. Don't we love that? Short cooked, low, not a lot of water, lots of meaty bones, and cartilage and things like that, etc. So anyway, it's one of the things that I really would love people to get at, like, let's get the ability to eat this as part of a meal. Again, you and I both know there are people on the spectrum. There's a broad spectrum of people who come to GAPS. Some people can't do that yet. That's okay. Some people really need to not eat the vegetables. Absolutely. Some people need to be drinking the stock and sipping on it all day because that's all they can manage right now. Bless them. They're not always going to be there, though. Right? So for the people who really can eat the vegetables, eat the meat, let's get this, like, let's do the one pot meal. I call it the one pot meal that heals.
I love that. I love that. And when you were talking about obviously the difference between the Western A price diet approach versus GAPS, the way I think about it is depending on what is the level of gut damage, what is the level of the damage in your body, in your system, then you can then follow either one of the spectrum of the GAPS diet and then progress to Western A price. Because let's be honest, Western A price foundation is just one of the very traditional way of eating. I grew up in traditional culture. I grew up in Poland, and
Yes.
I know that you have roots in Hungary and Italy. So you also have connection with those very, very traditional diets. So
Yes.
I remember my grandma cooked meat stock every single day. Well, that's a lie. We ate meat stock every single day, but on
Right.
Sunday she would cook a massive pot. We would have it on Sunday as a, just before that was the first dish on Sunday. Then on Monday she would make, let's say, tomato soup. On Tuesday, she would make sauerkraut soup. On Wednesday, she would make a fermented gherkin soup.
Yes.
Then we would have pork meat stock on Saturday made with fermented rye flour. So meat stock is part of all the traditional cultures, regardless of which country you are. It might just look slightly different. And I do
Yes.
remember my grandma telling me that back in the day, if somebody has digestive issues, the first thing they would do, they would take chicken feet, water, and salt only. Chicken feet, water, and salt, make meat stock out of it, and they would drink it on empty stomach, first thing in the morning. No medications,
Yeah.
no painkillers, just meat stock. And I think for me, meat stock is, as you mentioned, is healing and sealing, and the sealing is in a quote unquote, because yeah, we don't want to fully seal that gut lining because we want nutrients to go through.
Yes.
But it's also an amazing, amazing tool to detox, because not many people talk about it. And I just wanted to point it out to
Yes.
people that certain amino acids are important, take into important function in our detoxification system. So for instance, glycine, it just takes part in liver to detoxification in the phase 2, in the liver detoxification. And drinking meat stock is not going to only heal and seal the gut, but
Yep.
will help to mop up toxicity, and you either pee it out or poop it out or sweat it out, and
Yes.
you just get stronger and healthier. So thank you for explaining why meat stock is such a core and essential component of the GAPS diet, because sadly, sometimes I work with people and they say, well, I've been on a GAPS diet for a year or even 2. Maybe I got some improvements because they removed processed food. So of course there will be some
Right.
improvement in health, but it's like I
Yeah.
stalled, I'm not healing. My first question is, how much meat stock do you drink? And sadly, there is a group of people saying, oh, maybe 2 cups a week.
Oh, you're kidding.
So I was like,
Wait.
okay,
Wait.
so
Stop the
wait.
presses.
So
Ooh.
we need to, I think when people read the yellow book, I don't know why, but for some reason that meat stock is being lost in that yellow book. I don't know why, but I think that many people say, but where in a yellow book is and is written that I have to drink 5 cups of meat stock a day to get that
Well,
therapeutic level.
yeah, well, you're right. I mean, so it's not written there, you see. It's not written
I
there.
know,
There's
I
no
know.
number written there. And so people will ask me often, either on my page or whatever, or even in the practitioner training, whatever, the coach training, how much do people need to drink? And so what the practitioners, as you know, what we have learned over the years of teaching this and working with clients and working with patients and et cetera, is that the more you drink, the faster the healing, right? And so I always say things like, we've come up with, an adult 4 to 6 cups a day, right? Like a quart or a liter. Can you get a liter in a day for an adult? So yeah, it's not written, but this is part of what we teach, right? We're out there, we're blowing the horn, everyone, meat stock and lots of it. But to just piggyback on what you were just saying, meats, you don't start there. You can't start there because of the detoxification properties of meat stock, which people don't understand, which is why I'm so happy you brought it up. Often people need to start with sometimes just a sip. Sometimes people need to start with a teaspoon. Sometimes people, I mean, we've had people, there are CGPs that have had people that have to start with 1 drop of meat stock in 8 ounces of water or 200 mLs of water and 1 drop of that, right? Because meat stock is detoxifying, meat stock people are amazed because, again, this is written nowhere. You and I know it, and the practitioners learn it. It can cause die-off. Meat stock causes die-off, folks, because meat stock causes detoxification. So proceed with mindfulness. I don't like to say caution because that makes you frightened. Proceed with mindfulness. Respect the healing properties of that food. They're very, very high, very high. And so we want you to start where you can. Start where you can. Start with a sip. Start with a half a cup, right? Start with whatever you start with and work your way up gradually to a large amount of meat stock, a quart a day, a liter a day, right? Every day for, I don't know, I'm always saying 3 months to start. Just do it, right? And also, it's important that people don't get too like either down on themselves or stressed out about, oh my God, I haven't had my quart a day. I'm not going to heal, because that happens too, right? Of just like, stay loose, take a deep breath. You're doing great. You're doing a good job. Whatever you're doing, the body will respond. So maybe today you only got 2 cups in. Perfect. Maybe tomorrow you got a quart in. Yay. Right? Like, but again, to put meat stock where it needs to be in the diet, it is the number one, in my book, number one food that has to happen, along with all of your, right, your gut biome builders with all your cultured dairy and all your lactoferments, right? They've got their job too, but we have to stop the flow of the inappropriate microbes, toxins, and food particles into the bloodstream from a gut that is leaky. And that's where, meat stock. So heal and seal, detox, die off. They have to keep it all kind of in their mind, or maybe not. Just make it, eat it, love it, and move on. Don't worry about it. Get it going.
And I really like what you just said. Just eat it and love it and don't fear it. Because as you've said, some people, when they hear, oh, I need to drink 5 cups of meat stock every single day, and I can only tolerate, let's say, half of the cup, how am I going to heal? So it brings a lot of fear. And we both know that healing happens in the place of love rather than fear.
Absolutely.
So one of the things I would recommend to anyone, just work on your fear and just be grateful, enjoy that meat stock, and be grateful you can tolerate half a cup.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Monika, you've been working with lots of clients. You've been teaching many people, students, members, GAPS coaches, GAPS practitioners. What sort of recoveries or kind of success stories you've seen when people started drinking more meat stock?
It really moves people from either the people that you were talking about, like people that feel like they're stuck. They're like, oh, I've been doing this for so long, right? Like I've been on GAPS for 9 months. I'm like, it's a 2-year commitment, a minimum. Let's get that straight, right? Like, right? But or I've been doing it for a year and a half, or I'm just not seeing the types of healing that I need. And then the question always is what you said. Hey, my question actually isn't how much are you drinking? It is, how are you making it? Because right, we have to go back, and often we're tweaking, but there are a lot of people that are not getting the healing are doing bone broth, right? Or they're not eating the nibbly bits, right? I keep saying that, but that's Dr. Natasha's little name for all of the pieces of connective tissue. She calls them nibbly bits. It's the cartilage on the end of the chicken bone. It's the, right? It's the skin around the shank, which I actually love. Some people get crazy with the, don't like that texture, but all those things, right? So how are they making it? And then how much are they drinking? So once we move that level to 3 cups a day, 4 cups a day, people really start seeing things resolve. And I'll give you another story in a moment. And sometimes they have, sometimes they find their symptoms coming back, actually. right? Because of the layers of healing. They say, oh, I've been doing this for so long. Some of my symptoms are better. And then I started drinking a lot of meat stock, and then I felt bad again. I'm like, yay! Dr. Natasha says, yay, right? Maybe she doesn't say yay. That's the way I say it, but she'll say, congratulations, like felicitations, like you're doing another layer of healing, right? All right. So that can happen, and we don't want people to be worried about that. You have symptoms come back up. Go and read in the Blue Book, the chapter on healing. Dr. Tasha talks very clearly about peeling the layers of the onion. Sometimes, when the body has more resources, it's going to work more deeply, right? I have two stories, which I love. They actually make me cry. I try not to cry for you, but one of them is a long time ago when I first started teaching the difference between meat stock and bone broth. It was about, golly gee, it was 12 years ago now. I know that because I had just moved to Colorado, right? So I know where I took the client and I know when I moved and la, la, la. So it was 12 or 13 years ago. And I was talking with a mom who had a child who was nonverbal. The child was 4 years old at the time. And the parents had tried everything. Right? Like, God bless them. They tried so many. They tried gluten-free. They tried dairy-free. They tried, all this stuff that, the Western medical people suggest. None of it worked. So she called me really in desperation. The mom did, and said, look, my child has never spoken. She's nonverbal. And we've tried everything. And I said, okay, have you tried meat stock? She didn't know what it was.
She must have been very surprised by that suggestion.
She didn't know what it was. So I told her, I said, this is what it is. This is how you make it. And she already had all the processed food out of the diet. Great. She already had all the sugar out of the diet. She'd done many, many good things, right? Okay. So I ended the session with her and I didn't hear back for 2-3 months. I got a call back and she had the daughter on this meat stock and she was doing about 2 cups a day. This is a small child, right? So 2 cups a day is a good amount. I keep looking at my ball jar. That's about 400 mLs. She told me she was doing about this amount of meat stock every day. And she told me the story about how the mom and dad were in bed one morning. The child had her own room. And one morning, out of the blue, seemingly, the child comes bouncing into the room, jumps on the bed and says, right, like, yeah, good morning, mommy, daddy. First time, never spoke in her life.
Wow.
It was meat stock. That was it. She had been doing everything else. She didn't even, frankly, I mean, I said, do some sauerkraut, do some yogurt, but really, I was not working one-on-one with this person every single day or every single week. For months, I merely said, you're doing good things by having taken all the garbage out, right? By sourcing good traditional foods. I really wept. So that girl is now off the autism spectrum, fully verbal, and I'm sure that, I mean, God, it was 12 years ago, so she's probably graduating high school soon.
Wow,
That's one.
Yeah.
And then the other one is actually a client of mine. This was way before the Blue Book was written. So Blue Book came out what, in 2020, 2021? I don't know.
I think 2020 from memory.
Yeah,
4 years
I think
ago.
that's true. Okay, so it was before the Blue Book came out. So it was before no plant was written anywhere. It was something that Dr. Natasha had been teaching, talking about with her gas practitioners and her coaches. Like, if this happens, take out I'm working with people, right? This was when she was just working with people and gathering that information of, this is what I'm doing in my own clinic, right? This is what I'm doing. So I had a woman come to me. She had ulcerative colitis. She had it, she was in her late 30s, early 40s. She had it all of her life, like all of her life. And she had like bleeding, like she was bleeding. She tried everything. She tried SCD. She tried paleo. She tried keto. She tried you name it, she tried it. She even tried lots of vegetables. Right? Okay. We now know that that's not the best idea. Actually, we've known it for a long time. At least we've known it for a long time. Maybe the mainstream doesn't know that vegetables are not your answer when you have that kind of condition. In any case, so she came to me. She said, Monika, I've tried everything and I've worked with everyone. That's not true, of course, but I've worked with doctors. I've worked with naturopaths. I've worked with nutritionists. I've worked with everybody. I have totally I have not wanted to do the GAPS diet because I'm afraid of it. And I need help. Can you help me? I said, I'll do my best. Of course. I always say I'll do my best. I will give you everything I've got. We'll listen to what's going on for you and we'll figure it out. So we did no plant with her the way that I knew it at the time, right? It was basically no plants. You do lots of meat stock. You do lots of cultured dairy. There wasn't anything about bringing this in first or anything. It wasn't anywhere, right? But now we know there's a protocol. But at the time, it was just we took all the plants out, even the spices in the meat stock, nothing, not a bit of plant matter. She did meat stock and she would rotate it. She actually was on beef meat stock for probably 6 months because that's all her body wanted. The body didn't want chicken. The body didn't want turkey. It didn't want lamb. It wanted beef. And she actually was also a farmer. God bless her, with like 4 kids. This mom, right? So she's like, I'm making my meat stock. So I said, listen to your body. Your body wants beef, 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 beef. Do beef. Perfect. I don't care which one you do. Listen. Body says beef. So we did no plant. She ate tons of yogurt, right? Raw milk yogurt, GAP style, 24-hour long, etc. She ate tons of kefir. She loved both of them. She ate a lot of fat. She had meat stock. She had no vegetables. She had lots of liver. Like, she did all the good things. Yeah, fats, liver, organ meats, whatever. She's healed. She's healed. And she's stayed healed. Like, she has stayed healed for years now. She's like, Monika, no one else, nothing else could do it. Nothing else could do it. So that makes, like, when those things happen, like, of course, we celebrate every victory that our people, our patients, our clients have, of course. But it's those that make you just like the nonverbal child going verbal. What? Like, I get goosebumps just talking about it. Yeah. Right? And this beautiful mom who's like running a farm, raising 4 boys, and she's like, I'm going to do this, and she did it. So those are my 2 big ones.
Such an inspiration for all these versatile moms out there, moms with autistic kids. So there is a hope. If one mom with autistic kid could turn that kid's health around with the GAPS diet, and especially with meat stock, if there are moms listening to us, there is a hope for you. The same for all the people with severe digestive issues, ulcerative colitis being one of them. Yes, there is hope. I've seen so many miracles as well, and sometimes my throat kind of closes or it tightens up when I hear feedback I'm getting from the clients. Just recently, I've been working with a mom of a schizophrenic. She has a schizophrenic daughter. And she's on medication, and sometimes she's locked up in a hospital, sometimes for a week, sometimes for a month. Yes. But she says, every time she says, when my child drinks 1 or 2 cups of meat stock, within half an hour, she's kind, she's calm, wow, she's nice, she's like a normal, healthy child. But the moment she's got a day without meat stock, she becomes angry, irritated, sometimes even violent. But even within half an hour, you can see the impact of meat stock. Yeah. Or the other client also reported he'd done a GAPS fast. For those who do not know what GAPS fast is, Dr. Natasha describes it in the blue book. Yes. But it's basically drinking meat stock, nothing else. So he drank meat stock the whole day and had a little bit of sauerkraut juice. The next day, the gates of gallstones opened. And
Yes.
without even doing liver flashes, without doing any other modalities, the body
Yeah.
basically pushed out things which were causing, issues. So, if you're listening to our podcast, please do share any success stories you've seen, you've experienced, you've heard about,
Yes.
because the more we share those stories, there are people with the same conditions thinking, if that person could have done it, maybe there is a chance for me. And I'm sure there is. So please do share whatever you've heard or personally experienced or seen, because that kind of
Yes.
helps Dr. Natasha to spread the word around the power of meat stock and the power of the
Yes.
GAPS diet.
Yes.
But Monika, it's all, beautiful about how meat stock is, the most healing and magical substance in the out there. But I also wanted to talk about the ugly stuff. Well,
Okay.
alleged ugly stuff.
Okay.
There have been some studies suggesting there is a potential lead contamination in bone broth. And I
Yes.
have clients asking me, so if there is a risk of lead contamination in bone broth, whether these concerns are valid or not, we can talk about it. But they concerns, if there is a slight chance that there will be a higher level of lead from chicken in meat stock, is it worth consuming that meat stock? So what are your thoughts about the whole, the studies showing lead contamination in bone broth? What can we do with that information?
Well, it's interesting that you would bring that up, because that's actually the reason that we have all the data about meat stock being low in glutamic acid, which is, of course, an excitotoxin, and bone broth being high in glutamic acid. So I just want to go back there, and then I'll just for a little bit of context. So in my book, you will see a study that was commissioned by Kim Schutte, who was of biodynamic wellness. She was one of the first GAPS practitioners trained. She's passed a few years ago. But this question was running around going, oh, there's lead in broth, there's lead in stock, there's lead, we're all going to die. We are all going to die, but okay.
Not yet.
So it's not yet. So she said, let's go and do a study to look for lead in meat stock and meaning short cooked stock, which is meat stock, and bone broth, which is long cooked and lots of bones, right? And so she did the study, and that's the study that we have that showed that first of all, there was no lead in bone broth or meat stock, but also that that piece of why is meat stock so important versus bone broth for people who have leaky guts and leaky brains. Why? Because it's low in glutamic acid, which is an excitotoxin, which makes the frontal lobe go crazy in the brain and can trigger nervous system symptoms, specifically seizures. That's why we don't do bone broth on GAPS. I mean, we just don't, because it can really trigger nervous system dysregulation. So I just want to say it's so great that Kim Schutte went looking for lead, and what she found was A, no lead, and B, lots of data about the amino acid composition of both of the different types of stocks. Yeah, meat stock versus bone broth. That's the first thing. The second thing is that what we need to do is a couple things. One, source clean food, the best that you can, because where are the animals that are having lead or arsenic? That's really the big one in chickens, at least in the US. Where are they? They are animals that are not being raised the way they're supposed to be raised. They're being raised in feedlots. They're being raised in concentrated animal feeding operations. Those are CAFOs, CAFOs. They are being raised in places that are downstream of these places. So the water is contaminated, etc. So one of the most important things to do, I'm going to say three things. One of the most important things to do is to source clean food, the best that you can. That's the first thing. Okay. Must. Meaning, raise it yourself. A lot of people can't. It's okay. Find a farmer who raises in the way that you know and you agree with, right? Someone who'll tell you what they're doing. Yeah. Join a CSA. Order if you need to online. Lots of people in the US do that because they can't get it where they are. Yeah. Find, source, clean food, number one. Number two, if there's a problem with a certain protein like chicken and you are frightened about it, don't eat it. I mean, right? Like one of the things you can do if you really have, and I say this to people, either line up with what you're doing and be like, I am in, or don't do it. So if you have a concern about chicken in your area, don't eat the chicken, eat something else. What could we do? Lamb, beef, pork, goat. I don't care. Pheasant, pigeon, turkey, quail, fish. Find something. So if you have a concern with a certain type of animal, and chicken usually is the one because of the way that they are raised in confinement, and yeah, poor things. Oh, anyway. So find something else. Yeah. And then the last piece, of course, is the thing that I know that I just sort of mentioned, which is, do the best you can and bless it and go, right? Like do the best you can and then be all in and go for it. There's one other piece. We have to go back to the understanding of the difference between meat stock and bone broth. One of the different, there's many differences, maybe four. Anyway, this fundamental difference is that bone broth is made with bone, mostly bones, some meaty bones, but mostly bony bones where all the meat has been stripped off and all the connective tissue has been stripped off, right? Like it's just bone, number one. And number two, it is cooked long. It is cooked long. Meaning bone broth for chicken, you're going 24 hours. For beef, you're going up to 72 hours. That's 3 days, people. Long time. Yeah. When you do that, you are pulling things out of the bones into the stock that you will not get in meat stock. It's just not going to happen. It can't because it's not cooked long enough and because it's mostly meat. So that's what I have about this whole thing about issues about lead. It's interesting because I haven't seen lead much in the US. Most of it, what I've seen in the US is arsenic and arsenic with chickens, but those are chickens that are grown by the major poultry producers, right, in the US, and people know who they are. These are not organic, free range, pastured, on the grass chickens that are problematic. So that's what I have.
And thank you for sharing that, because I think there are two things I just wanted to add in the context. The reason we're talking about the bones and the reason we're saying bone broth is not the right one, because it may pull stuff out from the bones, is because lead typically accumulates in the bone. Number two, about the study, I do invite everyone to go to the Western A Prize website, where there's article and it was basically that study was assessed from left, right, and center. And basically the issue was actually here in the UK around Hemel Hempstead, where the farm was located. Actually, they didn't even know the exact location, but what it turned out that the bone broth made out of the skin, not the bones, the skin, was the highest in lead. So what it tells us that basically those chickens which were claimed to be organic, they were possibly dusting, which means basically kind of, playing in the soil, rolling the dust, and they were absorbing that lead through the skin. Therefore, there were more lead content in the skin. But interesting fact, when there are certain farmers who actually live around where there is a higher lead exposure in the water or soil, they feed chickens, they add garlic to the feed. And the garlic's got two fantastic benefits. Number one, If we eat something which has lead in it, garlic will stop from the absorption in the gut. So it will pull it out from the gut and we just poop it out. Number two, garlic actually goes inside the tissues. So once it passes the bloodstream, it goes inside the tissues, catches lead, and it takes it out. So those, I don't know, who raise their own
Yay,
chickens,
garlic.
who raise their own chickens, and you know that there is lead contamination in the area, just give garlic, add some garlic to their feed. But
well, one more quick thing, and for people who are eating meat stock, garlic is all over the GAPS diet.
yes,
So it's
yes,
already prophylactic.
yes,
Right.
absolutely.
So we are adding garlic into our meat stock right before we drink it. So, again, here's this timeless wisdom that Dr. Natasha has infused into the GAPS diet. I don't know if she knows about the garlic and lead, but there it is. The garlic is in the diet, taking care of any issues with the lead. Perfect. Love it.
And I think the other concept is GAPS is also high in calcium. All the fermented dairy, sardines, yes, all of those things are very high in calcium. And lead will always compete against calcium. So the more calcium we consume as foods, then we're going to push that lead out of the body. Hi, just a quick note. As I continue to provide you with free content, I am reminded of the power of community and sharing. If you find value in what you hear, I kindly ask you to share this video with your family, with your friends, and with other community members. So let's join hands in spreading the knowledge and benefits of no plant GAPS, detox modalities, and healing. And remember, if you are eager to explore further, our online training is just a click away.
Fantastic.
But Monika, I'm very conscious of time, and I love the conversation we're having. But I think one of the concerns when people start drinking meat stock is the big word, histamine.
Oh God. Yes. Sorry.
Very briefly,
yes,
if somebody comes to you and says, I've drank some meat stock and I have a massive histamine reaction.
Yeah.
What do you tell? Is there a way to modify that meat stock? Is there a way of actually make that meat stock journey so it's not so high in histamine and people do not actually react?
Sure. So a couple things about histamine, and I do have a YouTube on histamine, maybe 2 or 3 on Ask the GAPS Chef on YouTube. People want to hear this taught more, like longer, but so here's the thing. Yes, there is a way to minimize histamine in meat stock, but I want to back up a little bit because we have to remember that histamine is exogenous and endogenous, meaning you can eat foods that are high in histamine. That's where we're going to talk about what can we do with meat stock, but your body produces histamine all the time, and it's supposed to, and it's a normal and natural response. Now, once we heal and seal that gut, the histamine, the off the charts histamine responses will go down. Your body is producing excess histamine because your gut is leaky. That's the basic part of it. So what you want to do, yes, we absolutely want to, for people who have extreme histamine responses, did I say that? For people who have extreme histamine responses, I'm saying that because I have found, I don't know if you've found, people are frightened at this point of histamine. Like they're freaking out, they're frightened, they're worried. Now, are there people who have extreme histamine responses? Yes, and bless them, and we'll work with them, yeah? But is that the majority of the people that are drinking meat stock? No. So I want to really emphasize that because we have moms, bless them, or dads or caregivers of any kind who are working with children or themselves or their spouse or whoever, and they're just frightened out of their wits to like drink meat stock because there's going to be a histamine response. So don't be afraid of histamine, folks. Histamine is a normal response of your body. And when you have a leaky gut, it will be higher. And sometimes it's very high. right? But for people who have histamine responses where, oh, my child's nose is running, that is not a histamine response we need to worry about. Or their ears turn red, or they get a small eczema flare, or right? Like these are things that are not in my humble, I'm not humble, you know that. In my understanding, these are not things we have to worry about, or those types of things. So I really, really encourage anyone who's drinking meat stock, anyone who's doing the GAPS diet, anyone who's working with GAPS for a loved one or another person in their lives, don't be afraid of histamine and push through unless it is a massive problem. What's a massive problem? I mean, there are people who have very extreme histamine responses. Monika has seen them. I have seen them, yes, but they're not the majority. Okay. Enough said of that. What can you do with meat stock? So the thing that we need to understand is that histamine from foods we're going to eat increases over time. Okay, histamine increases over time, with the exception of fermented foods, where it decreases over time. Like sauerkraut that's a year old will be very low in histamine, or maybe even 6 months old, right? The longer ferments go, the less histamine there is. However, with everything else, anything that's cooked especially, histamine will increase over time. So what do we do for making meat stock less histamine, to have less histamine? A lot of people cook from frozen. They cook from frozen. They actually take the frozen raw chicken or beef or whatever they're going to do. They put it in the pot and they make the meat stock. And then they consume the meat stock right away. And then they freeze right away afterwards. So there's no there's no time where histamine could be developing. There's no oh, I defrosted the meat in my refrigerator for 3 days. Bonk, right? Gong, warning. Or, oh, I made a pot of meat stock and it's been in my refrigerator for 2 days, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. So all these things, time is what the increase of time will equal the increase of histamine. So cook from frozen, eat immediately, and then freeze, or cook meat stock fresh every day. Every day. Now, other people have said that there are stronger histamine responses to things like beef versus chicken. So again, figure out for you always, right? Listen to the body. What does your body work well with? Some people's bodies work well with chicken, some people with beef, some people with lamb, some people with goat, some people with trout. We don't care. Just make the meat stock, find what your body needs, wants, responds well to. And again, how else do you control a histamine response if you need to? With the amount that you take in, which you'll be able to bring more in over time. Yeah. And dilute. People don't use dilute. Dilute. What does that mean? Take a teaspoon of meat stock and put it in a cup of water, right? That's also going to dilute the histamine and you'll have less of a histamine response. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things is that many people, for instance, I work with many people from like carnivore based context, and I'm sure you've seen on different forums and groups lots of people eating beef, and there are lots of people eating aged beef, and of course many people who have real histamine issues, they will be reacting to aged beef, and when they do meat stock from beef, there will be reaction. So we always start with the meat, which is probably sometimes it's lamb, sometimes it's a wild game.
Yes, that's even better.
And sometimes when I work with people who've got access to it, fishermen who can actually provide a very fresh fish.
Yes.
Basically, they catch it, kill it, cook it within
that's it
an hour. Then it will be low histamine. You know, the longer fish kind of waits on the shelf, obviously the more histamine it will acquire.
Yes.
But Monika, I know that obviously we've talked about the difference between meat stock, bone broth, and typically one of the most common mistake people people make when preparing meat stock is actually they make bone broth instead of meat stock. What are the other most common mistakes people make?
Yeah, a couple things. So one is they will use too much water. They will use too much water. It's because why? Because they're used to making bone broth, right? Bone broth is a lot of water and a little bit of bones. In meat stock, we do a lot of meaty bones and not a lot of water because we want it to gel. Yeah. So water, they make, they put in too much water. So if you don't want to measure the water, a long time ago, years ago, I don't know, almost 9 years ago. My goodness, is that really when I wrote that book? It's true.
Wow.
Okay. Time is flying. I came up with this thing of, okay, for every pound, you're doing a quart of water, but it's even better put the meaty bones in the pot, go up by not more than 2 inches of water, and you're good, right? Like a thumb. If you don't want to, if I'm talking American silly, like inches versus centimeters or whatever, fine, use your thumb. There, everybody has a thumb. That's how much water you put over the meaty bones. That's easy, right? So water, people, they just waterlog the bones. You're never going to get gel, right? That's one of the biggest ones. Another one is they actually cook it too high. Like they boil it. I keep hearing boil. No boiling. That's not true. We bring it to a boil. We skim and discard the scum. We put it to a simmer. We're simmering nice and low. I actually prefer to make my meat stock in the oven because it's spectacular. What that meat stock is like very different flavor, rich, amazing, low oven, Dutch oven pot, lid on, long, not too long, really 3-4 hours, blah, blah, blah. Beautiful. I encourage everyone to try the oven. I really do, especially as the weather gets cooler now. I mean, maybe not in the summer, but certainly fall, winter, early spring. So they boil it. And then if you boil it, you're breaking all the bonds in the collagen. It will not reform. It will not become gel. Or they cook it too low. Like, I actually went to a dear friend's. I had taught her about meat stock. She's like, I just can't get it to gel, Monika. I just can't get it gel. I'm like, let me come over. So I come over, I'm like, okay, do what you do. Let me troubleshoot, which I often do online with people, troubleshoot, right? Like, oh, it's too high, it's too low, it's too much water, it's not the right bones, la, 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 all those things. And she actually had it so low that there was no movement in the water. You have to have some movement. I have a little tiny video on my Facebook page, Simply Being Well, blah, 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 Facebook, that has like I call it the perfect roll, right? Like it's just showing you that it's pretty darn still on top and it's just got some movement underneath, right? So if you have no movement, you're not cooking. So if you have too much movement, yay, it's boiling. Yeah. So those are, you want to watch the temperature. You want to watch the amount of water. You want to look at the type of bones you have. You have to have enough to make gelatin. You have to have enough joints to make gelatin. Right? Joints, gelatin, connective tissue, gelatin. I actually wrote all of those things as the top reasons why meat stock or bone broth will not gel in my book. I wrote it like there's 8 or 9 of them, whatever. And then how to troubleshoot them. So, yeah.
And that information is gold because one of the most important things is to prepare meat stock in the right way so that people can actually achieve therapeutic results out of the meat stock.
Yes.
If meat stock doesn't gel, yes, you still get nutrients, you still get minerals, you still get the fats, you still get proteins. Yes. However, if you are very serious about making that meat stock so that it heals and seals the gut, then I would definitely, number one, get your book and read how to troubleshoot. But I would definitely would get involved in your meat stock training class, the online class, because
the master class. Become
class,
a master at making meat stock.
Because I think it's so important that we get it right. Not only are you going to save your time, not only are you going to save your frustration, and you're going to save your money because within a week probably you will master and
Absolutely.
how to make meat stock. But I would like to
Yes.
hear from you, Monika. Like, can you just describe to us what is included in that Meat Stock
Sure.
Masterclass training
Yes.
program you developed?
You know, I just have to say, I love this class. I know people that are listening to this right now that have been students of mine will say, Monika, you say that every time. Like whatever I'm teaching, when I'm ever in the kitchen, I'm like just in my happy place. And it's really my love of teaching people in the kitchen. It's really, truly. So anyway, I love this class. It's 81 lessons. 81 lessons. It is 7 classes, right? So 7 discrete classes. They all have video. They all have recipe downloads. They all have PDFs, all of that stuff. I go through, 81 lessons, 9 hours of video. So I start with what is meat stock? So we do like an introduction. What is it? Why does it work? How does it work? Just the basics of meat stock. How does it fit in gaps? All of that is lesson 1. And then I start going through discrete lessons. You get a whole lesson on what I call the one pot meal, right? The one pot meal that heals. Then you get a whole nother lesson on what I call low meat stock, which is more about, I really want to drink more through the day. So how do I do that? What kind of bones do I use? What kind of pots do I use? Right? How long do I cook it? All those things. So we go from the one pot, which is really a Dutch oven idea, to low meat, to another class, hearty soups. How do you turn meat stock into a hearty soup? Then we'll do one on blended soups. How do you turn it into blended soup with tips and tricks and all those things and equipment and what to use and why to use it and all that stuff. And then I also include the 2 things that I don't know. This is really making me think about what I've got to do next. I got a lot of classes to create, Monika. Okay. This piece. So I've spent my but years trying to get people to make meat stock instead of bone broth, right? So now I'm spending time on like, okay, let's do the one pot meal. But there are 2 things that people miss in gaps. Like they do. I don't know if you see people missing them, but I see them missing them all the time. How do I get meat stock into my family that isn't soup or stock, that isn't a beverage that I'm drinking? You make GAPS stews and you make GAPS casseroles. And they are totally highlighted. They are the highlights of stage 2. Stage 2, not stage 5, not stage 3, stage 2. They're there. I'd love for people to learn these things, right? Like, because I keep hearing maybe you hear it too. I'm so tired of drinking soup. So don't. Make a casserole, make a stew, right? I'm so tired. It's so boring. Oh, what are you doing? I'm making chicken. I've been drinking it for a year. Okay, make lamb, make beef, right? Like people, right? Like I also provide things like herbs that go, right? So like, how can you mix up your meat stock? This is not no plant, by the way. But how can you mix up your meat stock? This thing. And I pray that people will come and learn that GAPS is a way of life. And it's easy once you know what you're doing. Once you broaden your perspective of, oh, I've got to drink stock all day, right? You need to have stock, but how do you have that stock? Do you have it as a blended soup? Do you have it as a casserole? Do you have it as a one pot meal? Do you have it as a mug? Like, I mean, one of my favorite breakfasts, folks, mine is chicken or beef. Meats or lamb is my favorite, actually. That's not even. Sorry, I digress. Stock with a couple of eggs that I crack in there, right? Good pastured eggs. I actually add Parmesan cheese. That's my Italian self coming in. And a handful of greens, kale, spinach, something, right? That breakfast will keep me 4 or 5 hours.
Oh, I love the creaminess of meat stock when you just crack egg yolk into it. It's just so divine. Absolutely love it.
Yes. And then don't forget your cultured cream.
Yes. Yes,
buckets
yes,
of the cream
yes.
in there, right? But anyway, so the Meat Stock Masterclass is on my website, simplybeingwell.com. It's also sitting on the GAPS training website if people want to find it through there, because it's approved by GAPS. Dr. Natasha loves it. La, la, la. Let's go there. I would love to give people a coupon, right? All caps, Meat Stock 20. That'll take 20% off the class.
Oh,
That's a big
fantastic.
chunk.
Thank
So
you.
for
Thank you.
anyone
Yeah.
that listens to this with you, Monika, and yeah, Meat Stock, all caps 20 will take 20% off the class. So I
And
do hope people will come and check it out.
I think this resource is so needed because, you know, regardless if you just starting GAPS diet and you want to master how to make meat stock, or maybe you already experienced on the GAPS diet and you've done it for a year or two or longer, but looking for some more creative ways of how to incorporate that healing liquid into lifestyle, or maybe even, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe even if you are a health practitioner or coach who wants to support your clients. And because quite often I get questions, like you've mentioned, like how else do I drink meat stock apart from just drinking it? And you know, there are so many different ways of consuming it. So I think everyone who's listening to it, I really invite people to check the Monika's Meat Stock Masterclass. I will add the links to the training, and I will add the discount code underneath as well, so you could access it.
Great.
And I absolutely, you know, Monika, I absolutely love your teaching style. You know, I attended your cooking classes, and although, you know, I am from the traditional cultures, and I thought, like, I don't need to learn how to do meat stock. My grandma taught me that. And yet I learned so many new things, so many new kind of adaptations. And I think your way of teaching is, I love your teaching style. You're very funny, you're to the point, your instructions are very simple. So I think, you know, it's such a great resource that I do highly recommend for people to check it out.
Thank you.
And just to kind of wrap up our conversation before we go, if you were to give, let's say we've got somebody who is just a newbie, just somebody who starts the GAPS diet, one tip to walk away, what should they do in terms of getting that the meat stock to the next level? That's one tip.
Let's see. Put it in the refrigerator. That's so. Why do I say that? I say that because often people will go straight from the pot into their bowl, into their cup, into their whatever, and they don't even know if their meat stock gelled. They don't. So, and I have people go, "Oh, I'm not making gelatinous meat stock. I don't know what I'm doing." Of course, we troubleshoot, but one of the keys is to go ahead and strain out everything, put your meat in one thing for just to see, or take a scoop, right? Take a ladle, put it in a jar, stick it in the fridge, and see what did you get. That's going to help you troubleshoot, right? And remember, it's overnight. You want it to sit in the refrigerator overnight, and you'll know, ooh, do I have that? Watch it wiggle. Like, that's a crazy Jell-O commercial from the US from the 70s. Sorry, but that's true. It goes in your head, right? Watch, is it something you can actually cut a square out of and like wiggle on a plate? Or is it water? And what is it? Or is it somewhere in between? So I encourage you to do that maybe every time from the beginning, but I encourage you to do that so you can have a sense of, am I really achieving? I call it achieving gelatin. And one of the things I want to give you and everyone watching and listening and whatever is, remember that viscous means thickened stock is gelatinous stock. It doesn't have to be, right, just a like so gelatinous that you can like cut a square out of it with a knife, right? There are those days that you do achieve that, but more and more people achieve something in between, which is something where where since it's been refrigerated, when you pour it out of the jar, it's very thick. And when it's thick, you've done it. You have achieved gelatin. So, as you said before, Monika, you of course will drink it whether you achieve gelatin or not, but we are going for the gelatin, right? And so to remember that there is a scale of gelatin. Maybe that's the thing. There's a scale. There's the solid gelatin that you can cut, actually take a knife and cut. And there's the viscous kind of thickened liquid, and all of that counts and all of that matters. And you've done a great job. The last thing I'd like to say is bon appetit. Enjoy. Yeah, enjoy. One of the things I love about Meat Stock, and you talked about this all the way through, Monika, which is this. Dr. Natasha talks about it too. When you are cooking for others or for yourself, if you take the time to really cook with love, right, with good intention, with love, the healing properties of that food, I know I'm not allowed to say that, healing, but the healing properties of that food, of that stock, will increase exponentially. So just try your best to, when you go into the kitchen, to leave everything else that's troubling at the door, worries, anger, concern, any of that, leave the stress at the door and just be present to the cooking and the real gift that you're giving yourself and your children and your family when you cook nourishing food for them. It's very, very important now more than ever, and will continue to be going into the future.
Oh, absolutely. So I absolutely love that last bit. Not that I didn't love anything before, but I think there is so much truth into food is energy, food is information, and we need to focus on the levels of our emotions, on how we feel, what intentions we have, what we're thinking. And if we approach cooking meat stock with like, oh, I hate it, I have to cook it, it's so hard, that meat stock is not going to be us healing us. Thank you for that chicken who was raised on the pasture. Thank you for the farmer. I love this liquid. Thank you for healing me. And I think that will definitely magnify the therapeutic levels of this beautiful liquid. Monika, I am absolutely so grateful for our conversation. As always, very inspiring to chat with you. Just the last thing, you've already mentioned your website, your Facebook group. I'm going to put the links into the show notes. But what is the best place to connect with you if people wanted to work with you?
Place to find me in terms of working together is on my website, simplybeingwell.com. Just go straight to the top where it says consultation, and you can book through there. And you can also find me, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on YouTube. Please check out the YouTubes. These are just little tiny informational things for you to learn. I call it Ask the Gap Chef. But if you'd like to work together, go to the website. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Simplybeingwell.com. That's where you'll find me.
All the links will be in the show notes. Monika, thank you so much for being my guest, and thank you everyone so much for listening.
Yes, thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Fantastic. Thank you.